Do you remember on episode 6 when I mentioned one of the pediatricians at my kid's doctor's office and how he looks like he moonlights as like a 90s boy band lead singer or something?
Like giving like Justin Timberlake or giving like Backstreet Boys?
Oh, I would say Backstreet Boys.
Hot.
More Brian. So I had to do some editing to episode 6 because when I took Oliver the last time and we had this PA, not only did we find out that his kids go to the same school as my son, not only is his youngest in the same grade as my son for the next 12 years.
Oh.
Wouldn't you know it? He lives in our neighborhood too. The new neighborhood we just moved to, he lives in it.
No.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, does he have a son?
Yep, it's a son.
What if they become best friends?
And he like told Oliver, he's like, if you see me riding the bike around the neighborhood, say hi. I was like, quickly just rolling through the Rolodex in my head of everyone that I told like that funny story to that I thought was so funny and like safely removed from my actual life, you know, that like I wouldn't see this person in my real life, including this podcast. So I had to go through all of our episodes and find it. I found it. It was episode 6. I just don't want that coming back to bite me in the ass on like a field trip.
You know what, though? Maybe this is like a moment where like, okay, you just always have to be done up.
I wish I could maintain that. Trust me, that is the goal I wish to maintain. But when you have like the smell of your kid's vomit in your hair, even after washing it, and then you have to see someone that just looks like they just stepped off the stage from their reunion tour, you know, like totally fit and in a peak of health, and you're like, I'm a troll. And he's so nice. And he's so good with the kids.
So sweet. Sweet as pie.
And it's really fitting because our last episode, we opened with you being like, I made that face in front of the whole class.
Yes.
And you're like everyone you were auditioning with. And then I'm like, here I am, like trying to put words back in my mouth. Like, oh my God.
And not smell like baby vomit. 3, 2.
Hi, Dee.
Hi, Dee. Before we start every episode, we like to share a vintage cocktail from my grandpa's little black book. All his own recipes from his days of owning a bar in Detroit in the 1940s.
So what is our drink today from your grandpa's little black book?
You know, I love me a fruity drink. When like we go to like on vacations or whatever, like I love me a Miami Vice, you know, like the mixture between like pina colada and strawberry daiquiri. So it's giving that, but it's more on ice, but it's called the Rye Whiskey Punch. Now, I don't normally like rye, but this was good. So it's 1 ounce of rye whiskey, 1/4 ounce of grapefruit juice, 3 ounces of pineapple juice, and 3 ounces of lemon juice. And then you pour it into a shaker, shake it up, and here we go. This one's kind of like this. It gives me rum punch, but it also has the bite of that like rye whiskey that I don't like.
So are we ready to get into it?
Let's do it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Forensic Files Duo podcast, where we recap, review, and provide updates on the cases featured on the true crime TV show Forensic Files. I'm Drew, and I knew nothing about true crime until we started this podcast.
And I'm Danielle, and true crime practically raised me.
If you're listening to us for the very first time and want to hear more about our friendship and how we became the forensic duo many moons ago, head over to episode 1 for the whole backstory. But to break it down real quick, we met in drama class in the 9th grade.
And we joined our school's forensic team, and we competed in the duo category. So 2 people perform a scene from a play. You can't look at each other, touch each other, or use props outside of chairs or stools. Then you take it to competitions and compete against other schools.
Our forensics team couldn't be more opposite of what forensic science is. The rules actively prevent any swapping of DNA of any kind. Turns out the word is a Greek word referring to speeches given to convince a group of people to make a judgment based on what is presented in the speech.
So this is where our worlds collide. On Halloween 2023, Drew came over to trick or treat with us. I had just come back from a true crime podcast conference, and while telling him all about it, Drew blurted out,
"Why are we not doing one together?"
So I wrote down all the things that have brought Drew and I together over the years, and the first thing I wrote down was forensics. Immediately, I knew there was only one right answer for our podcast topic, and it was all very serendipitous.
That is until I kept asking Danielle where the aliens are in these stories, because I thought we were recapping the X-Files. So needless to say, this has been a journey for me, but I'm happy to be on it with all of you.
Now for our regular disclaimer, we understand that we will be discussing a lot of sensitive topics, so although we may laugh at times, please remember that we are laughing at ourselves and ourselves only. We are not making light of what the victims or their families have gone through and may continue to be going through.
And in an effort to use the public's overall interest in the show Forensic Files and leverage the power of digital media, once the episode coverage is over, we will highlight a missing persons case, but today we will be bringing attention to the murdered.
Today's episode is listed on Wikipedia as Season 1, Episode 7, called Legionnaires Disease. It is a very, very different style of an episode. I'm honestly annoyed by this because I actively avoid medical shows, medical dramas, anything disease-related in general,
Same.
because if you don't know me, my family has had their fair share of medical trauma, as has yours, Drew. Yeah. So watching this post-pandemic, I immediately was like, oh, great. Another disease to be afraid of. We don't need that.
Nope.
I actually told Blake I was worried about the humidifiers we've been running the past couple of weeks, just due to us having like viruses, going around.
Right.
And Blake asked me, he's like, why? And I just go, Legionnaires disease, Blake. He rolled his eyes so far back. I swear I thought he was about to have a seizure. He's just like, I hate this episode. I go, me too. Okay, me too. I'm pissed. This is supposed to be my true crime safe space. Away from all of that.
This case takes place during America's Bicentennial in Philadelphia. Do you know what it is now? Because I don't.
Oh, you didn't get it?
I don't know. I thought robots.
Basically, America's 200th birthday party. So it had events that took place over like the course of mainly the summer, but it celebrated itself like a true capitalist. I was looking it up. So it was basically merch and money as merch. At least that's what like I've read regarding what people remember about that year. Literally like red, white, and blue on everything. And they made new coins, literally made new money that people collected. So I'm not kidding. Merch as money, money as merch.
You know what? This sounds so on brand for America.
Right?
Literally.
I thought so too. But I heard that America's 200th birthday party was a major disappointment. On Reddit, 15 Keys says, I've seen some pictures of the Bicentennial celebrations and they looked well attended and a lot of fun. That wasn't the case, apparently. Rizzo, who was, I guess, the mayor and...
Rizzo, like from Greece.
No, definitely not. Because this Rizzo guy was very, very like Trump vibe.
Oh, definitely opposite. Okay, cool.
Definitely not Rizzo. Rizzo was allowed to exercise her freedom of choice. And in Trump's America and Rizzo of Philadelphia's world, that is not the case. Anyways, so Rizzo had talked so much about how dangerous the city was that it, I guess, scared a lot of tourists away. Then they said a friend told me their dad had lined up a bunch of houses to rent out and lost his shirt because nobody came. And that is a saying, I guess, lost a lot of money, lost his shirt.
Oh, I was like,
yeah.
What?
I haven't heard something like that in a long time, but I feel like my grandparents use that saying.
This is such a reminder to how young our country is, especially living in London right now. I mean, it really does put things into a little bit of a better perspective.
Yeah. Another Redditor posted some history, so this context helped me kind of wrap my head around this event and what it kind of meant at that time. So in 1876, the World's Centennial Exposition was a huge success for the city and basically for America, and Philadelphia's coming out on the world stage as a new industrial power. In 1926, which was the 150th year celebration, it was a very expensive flop. It rained and was extremely hot. The corrupt city Republican machine insisted that the celebrations be moved to where the sports complex is now, which was swampland. We did get the Broad Street Line's southern extension out of it, but it sent the city hugely into debt. We actually got the wage tax out of it. And this is kind of confusing if you don't live in Philadelphia, I guess, but that was supposed to be a temporary payoff tax, and it's still a thing for that state, apparently. Then the Reddit poster says in 1976, it was another major flop. A lot of money was spent renovating Old City, and that's where most of the Park Service land there and in the area came from. Visitor numbers were very disappointing.
Yikes. Well, I was surprised because we opened the episode with a color scene. I'm going to critique this every episode, if it's color or black and white. But we're in season 1 where the reenactments are always black and white. But we see a marching band and random B-roll of what looks kind of like a 4th of July festivities circa 1976. But it's America's 200th birthday, and they're celebrating in America's birthplace, Philadelphia. In Peter's words, there were millions of tourists and hundreds of business gatherings, but then he gets dark.
Philadelphia made history that summer, but not for the Bicentennial. It was the mysterious death of 34 people that left a tragic legacy and launched the most extensive medical investigation in history.
It's the summer of 1976, and Philadelphia is busy with the bicentennial celebrations, tourist activities, and business conventions. And what should have been a time of celebration, even for the city officials, it turned out to be a time of unexpected difficulties.
Sanitation workers staged a work slowdown, which is a weird way of saying they were on strike, but okay. They were striking over a wage dispute, and we see mountains of uncollected garbage, and this created serious health concerns.
Then, if rotting trash in the summer heat wasn't concern enough, there was a threat of terrorist attacks. An anonymous tip warned of possible violence at the upcoming American Legionnaires Convention in protest against recent U.S. foreign policy decisions. I tried finding more information on the specifics here, and I couldn't. So sorry about that for anyone who was curious for more context like I was. All I could find, though, is that the threats were suspected to be from an American militant group. So not like a foreign threat, something we probably think of now post 9/11.
That convention was to be headquartered at the Bellevue Stratford Hotel, one of Philadelphia's finest hotels. But it was having some problems with the air conditioner. We see the most black and white soap opera reenactment that we've seen yet of a serviceman approaching a desk saying he's there to check the air conditioner. Okay, that's definitely foreshadowing.
We're just told that the hotel's air conditioning system was malfunctioning and that the repairmen were doing all they could to get it back up and running before the convention.
And here we are, back to the black and white. But this hotel is kind of like, okay, do you remember watching the old Haunted Mansion Disney movie?
It is my favorite.
Me too. And there's that scene that they kind of try to do in the ride in Disney, but it's definitely not as good as the movie where they get stuck on the elevator. This whole scene that we see was definitely giving that, but then I just was like, well, I guess I need to watch Haunted Mansion.
That's how I kick off Halloween season every year.
Yes. And then they just drop this on us.
Hotel security was also working to make sure that prostitutes were kept away from the hotel during the busy summer season.
Okay.
So do you think Forensic Files comes back around to justify making this point, or why they felt it necessary to budget, cast, and film a reenactment of a lady in a pantsuit, by the way, walking through a hotel lobby? A pantsuit. There is no other way to interpret the scene with Peter's narration over it about keeping sex workers away, because the only woman we see in this entire episode that's not attending a funeral, by the way, is this reenactment scene. If a pantsuit gives sex worker energy, then women really never had a chance at equality, did we?
I mean, I was here for it. That outfit looked fucking fierce. Peter tells us that on July 21st, 4,500 Legionnaires from around the state of Pennsylvania arrived in Philadelphia for their annual get-together. I didn't catch this at first, but it sounds like it was just from within the state, not nationwide Legionnaires. Am I the only one who was like, what the fuck is a Legionnaire?
Nope, I was right there with you. I feel I don't know if it, American history just really failed us, but I don't know. I've never heard these terms before.
It just it honestly reminded me of the Eagles Club that I would go to in up north Michigan, where my grandpa was a part of.
My dad was a part of the Elks Club.
The Elks Club.
Yeah,
that's kind of what this felt like. I guess you'll probably explain it later, but this is military, right?
Yeah. So here it is. Okay, so I never heard this term, and I feel like our millennial is showing a bit here, but Wikipedia says that the American Legion, commonly known as the Legion, is an organization of U.S. war veterans headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana. It comprises state, U.S. territory, and overseas departments, in turn made up of local posts.
And what do they do at these conferences? Sounds like a whole lot of nothing to Legionnaire Bob McGarry.
A jolly, jovial time where we naturally had meetings to attend and so forth, but normally the business would be over by noon, and we could then go out and visit the city.
Oh, jolly jovial time.
Oh, jolly, jolly old time. That is so cute. It makes me just want to say it in like a British accent. And that's not just because I'm living in London now, but like it just is so cute. And I think I'm definitely gonna bring that saying back.
You could rock it. If I said it, someone
No,
would
because I feel like I would just go to like Mary Poppins, like jolly, jolly old time.
It's so cute. Okay, well, after 3 days of business and pleasure, the 4,500 Legionnaires returned home. The convention had ended.
But a mystery began to unfold.
All of a sudden, we're at a funeral. And the audio, I swear, sounded more like a Wiccan ritual than a Catholic mass.
To be fair, there is a very blurry line separating the two. A non-Catholic could make a fair argument about like all of our monotone mumbling and the kneel, stand, sit, kneel, stand, sit routine.
Yep.
Once that burning incense and a medieval looking ball makes an appearance, things get real weird.
Did I ever tell you about how I lit a plant on fire being an altar server?
Please tell me it was during Mass.
It was Christmas. I hated being in charge of like carrying the candlestick, and I had to carry the candlestick, and you put it on the sides of the altar. Yeah, that was it. But there was always these plants, and then when Christmas came around, it was all the poinsettias. And so like I had my candelabra. I like look over at my friend being like the fellow altar server, and I was like, ugh. Like I kind of just was like, I cannot believe here I'm at 11:59 p.m. because it was midnight mass. And then his mouth drops, and he's like, and I was like, what? And I look over, and like 4 poinsettias are up in flames.
You opened the gates of hell during Christmas.
Because of me. We learned that 8 days later in Williamstown, Pennsylvania, Legionnaires James Dolan and John Rolfe died suddenly under mysterious circumstances. Both had attended the convention in Philadelphia.
He says that he doesn't think they've had 2 Korean veterans die in the same year, let alone 2 days apart from each other. I was a little confused about that because I was like, was he referring to the specific legion or like nationally? Because that seems a bit like hyperbole. I mean, these men aren't young chickens anymore. No disrespect, but I mean, that can't be true, right?
And then we find out the official cause of death was pneumonia. The coroner described their lungs as resembling Brillo pads, which kind of resembles my hair. This is all just too reminiscent of the first days of the pandemic. I mean, is it too soon? Because it made me feel that way.
Then within days, other Legionnaires fell ill, and the mysterious illness struck fast. First symptoms included headache, then muscle and chest pain, and a fever, which could get as high as 107 degrees.
Yeah,
which
that's high.
Is so high.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that I was hearing that right.
107.
I don't know that you could survive that.
In this episode, we meet 2 adorable old men who are giving me the old man from Up.
Charlie is totally them. Oh,
it just was giving that. Yeah. They were both Legionnaire besties, and they attended the conference, and one survived the illness. Bob McGarry was our jolly, jovial fellow in the first clip we played, and now we meet Charlie Davis.
Did you see Charlie's military photo? Are we going to talk about how handsome?
I did.
How handsome that young man was? He was hot.
That was like someone that popped up on my Hinge. I would swipe right.
Yeah, he was very good looking.
Yeah. Charlie is here now with his big old glasses that are magnifying his eyes so big, and I just absolutely love it. And he says that when he was sick, he thought...
And I thought, boy, here I am. If I'm going to die, I mean, I had 5 kids. That makes you think a lot. And I thought, oh boy, I hope that's not me.
Authorities in the state capital of Harrisburg feared an epidemic. And if that made anyone pause for a moment and wonder the difference, I got you. While an epidemic is large, it is also generally contained, while a pandemic is international and out of control.
They quickly called in the Centers for Disease Control to investigate. The good old CDC. Dr. David Frazier led the investigation, and I'm starting to think this isn't a murder thing.
My medical anxiety really didn't need this information. It could have done just fine without it. But alas, we carry on. Dr. David Frazier, a CDC investigator. Quick reminder, at this time, the show was called Medical Detectives. So I guess this does align with the show's main theme title at the time.
And Dr. Frazier looks the exact same, but with gray hair. His hair is so thick, it's kind of giving wig. Same volume, same widow's peak, same sideburns, just honestly a different shade from black to white.
Quickly, the number rose to 11 deaths, which at the time was 20%, and it just kept rising. Fraser's first task was to find out why some Legionnaires were getting sick and others weren't.
Which, at its most basic, involves comparing what people did who became sick with what people did who stayed well.
We're told this was difficult because the Legionnaires were spread throughout the state, so that definitely does answer my question regarding whether they were all local to the state. Nevertheless, the investigation into the death of the American Legionnaires became the largest and most complicated medical investigation in history. But I'm guessing a little global pandemic may have recently pushed this out of first place.
By the time Dr. David Fraser and his team arrived in Philadelphia, 39 more were seriously ill. All of the Legionnaires who died had a form of pneumonia, but investigators had no idea what was causing it, and the outbreak was now worldwide news. The press had given it a name, Legionnaires Disease, and because fear sells, the daily press reports kept fueling the fear many citizens felt. But I would like to take a moment to mourn the loss of 70s fashion. Did you see
It's so
those
good.
Suits and the
So
colors?
good. I know.
Oh, please bring that back. The monochromatic and everything. I was loving
it.
It
was so cute.
There was a reporter wearing a baby blue suit, and it struck a core memory of my parents telling me how they met. So, side story. Apparently, it was at the library, and my mom always talks about the baby blue suit my dad was wearing, which doesn't make sense for being a library, right? Best part, the library was a disco.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, so it was called the library.
It was called the library,
Fierce.
but it was actually a disco. So, like, growing up when I was really little, they're like, oh, we met at the library. And then as we got older, like, oh, yeah, we met at the library. It was the disco. Because then I'm like, wait, why are we wearing a baby blue suit at the library?
Right.
And it was like a bell-bottom baby blue suit, everything. Oh,
I can see your dad wearing that. I can totally see your dad wearing that.
Oh, yeah, he rocked the bell-bottoms and everything.
Yes.
And I just love to freaking hear it. Like,
oh my
God.
God.
I loved to find out that they were a part of that whole scene.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, like, don't lead with, like, disco goer vibes.
I can see Darlene totally doing that.
For sure. But that's like when you first meet her, that's not like what you get right off the cuff. Then you get to really know her and you're like, oh, for sure. This is like totally your vibe.
Yeah.
But if you look into the history of disco, it was a very progressive subculture. And I didn't know this until recently. I learned about the disco demolition, which was also called The Night Disco Died. I was on one of my favorite podcasts called American Scandal. The episode is called The Riot at Comiskey Park. I think I'm saying that right. It's in Chicago, I believe. Or no. And I'll link that episode in the show notes. But the hatred of the genre had like a lot to do with racism and homophobia. I had no idea. Yeah, so that event, fans were encouraged to bring their records to be destroyed in an explosion. It resulted in 50,000 people rioting and storming
I've heard about
the field.
this.
You've heard of this?
Yeah.
It blew my mind. It's just like a wild slice of history that I don't want us to forget from the 70s, but okay, moving on.
Your parents, Darlene and Michael, met at the fucking library. My parents, Darlene and Michael, met at the dry cleaners. But now I feel like I need to go ask my dad, was that like a secret disco? Or was it like a speakeasy club? Oh, I'm going to ask. Well, the fear created by the very stylish news anchors was strongly felt in the town of Monison, Pennsylvania. We are learning about Andrew Hornock. We're told he was a bus driver who had driven a drum and bugle corps to the Legionnaires convention. I'm sorry, a what and a what? A drum and a what? Is this a marching band?
Okay, I looked it up. I was like actually really looking forward to hearing you say a drum and bugle corps. So I looked it up, and according to Google, a marching band will include flutes, clarinets, and saxophones, but a drum and bugle corps will utilize only brass, percussion, and color guard. No woodwind instruments, and they are not affiliated with a school or a college.
Well, shortly after he arrived home, he fell ill and died from Legionnaires Disease. Then they just harshly tell us that
although he was extremely popular, few of his friends went to pay their last respects.
Not many people attended his visitation at the funeral home because people were getting worried that they might get sick themselves. Then we meet Dr. Lewis Polk, Philadelphia's health commissioner, who says the most accurate thing about human beings and how we react in these kind of circumstances, something we all can relate post-COVID-19.
If you deal with a catastrophe of a known cause, whether it's a flood, a fire, an earthquake, whatever, even though it may cause a lot of damage and even kill a lot of people, somehow as human beings, all of us can deal with a known cause catastrophe better than an unknown cause, a true mystery.
The CDC now had to gather information, and we see clips of them interviewing Legionnaires about literally everything they did over the course of the 3 days of the convention.
Investigators went all over the state to interview sick Legionnaires. We hear one who gets questioned about what they ate at the Go-Getters breakfast on Friday. And I just need to know the itinerary of that breakfast, because they're asking questions like, on Friday the 23rd, how often did you ride the main elevators? They are literally testing everything. They collected hundreds of dust, air, water, and ice samples, as well as rat and pigeon droppings from every hotel that was used by the Legionnaires. Anything which might be of interest to the biologists and toxicologists of the CDC.
Then they sent it all to Atlanta for analysis. Even tissue samples from the autopsies were collected and analyzed, and CDC investigators started coming up with some theories.
Swine flu was at the top of their list. And I didn't know swine flu was around back then, but apparently the symptoms were similar.
Then they say that parrot fever was also a possibility, which is apparently a disease spread by sick pigeons, which is so gross. I saw in another YouTube video that they suspected it was a virus spread by parakeets, and maybe someone snuck in their pet parakeet.
Where do you find this? Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding, because then this video said the hotel searched from top to bottom. No parakeets are found.
This whole episode is wild. But, like,
I know.
Honestly.
Could you imagine someone sneaking in a bird that talks?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I literally love, like, going down a rabbit hole on TikTok of, like, parakeets talking because they repeat everything. But, like, this seems a little bit of a stretch. Excuse me. So sorry. Just checking in. Any parakeets in here? No? Okay, good. We'll go to the next room. Excuse me. Yep. Then they say they suspected it was a massive case of food poisoning. And honestly, it just made me literally go back to the scene from Drop Dead Gorgeous when all the pageant queens go to the convention and get massive food poisoning from the seafood buffet. And Dr. Louis Polk is back, and this man has never looked so uncomfortable in his life. The way he paused and his eyes twitched when he had to say sex on television.
There were some thoughts early on that people in town for a convention possibly might have overindulged in one of several ways, whether it's drinking or sex or something.
Well, I guess maybe this is why they mentioned the sex workers, even though this theory goes nowhere. They wondered if it was a new strain of venereal disease called super gonorrhea. Apparently, the symptoms were similar to super gonorrhea, and there happened to be 2 outbreaks in other cities earlier that year.
Or did the outbreak stem from the rats and the recent sanitation strike, which left mountains of uncollected garbage in the streets the Legionnaires walked through?
Or what about the anonymous tip about a possible terrorist attack? Was it possible that the Legionnaires had been poisoned?
And the chef that they showed here cooking at the hotel was not wearing gloves.
Good catch. That's very, very disgusting. What they couldn't figure out was why some Legionnaires developed the disease while others did not. And one of our sweet grandpas, Bob, is back because his roommate got sick, so the CDC wanted him to get to the hospital right away. And I've never heard the word saliva said in a cuter way.
When I told them what I was there for, they rolled out the red carpet and they gave me a physical like I never had before in my life. They wanted every type of saliva, urine, and anything else that I could give them to be sent to the Disease Control Center in Atlanta, Georgia.
That tells them that not only is it not being spread in the hotel rooms, it also isn't being spread from person to person.
They were able to eliminate
typhoid,
the Lassa viruses,
the Marburg viruses,
pertussis,
herpes,
mumps,
measles,
super gonorrhea,
and the plague.
But they still couldn't identify the killer.
Dr. Fraser, the CDC investigator with voluptuous hair, tells us that among the various hotels they surveyed, the highest rate of illness that looked like Legionnaires' disease was among people who were registered at the Bellevue Stratford Hotel, and specifically in the week of the American Legion Convention. But there were some victims of the Legionnaires' disease who weren't Legionnaires at all, and they hadn't even attended the convention. And even on top of that, they'd never even set foot inside the Bellevue Stratford Hotel.
Get this. There were people who just walked along the sidewalk in front of the Bellevue Stratford who got sick, who never went inside or on the street across the way. The more time people spent on the sidewalk in front of the Bellevue Stratford, the more likely they were to get sick.
But none of the employees of the Bellevue Stratford Hotel contracted the disease. So what were the common factors among those who did? Most were over the age of 50.
Were smokers.
And had some underlying illnesses.
God, this sounds familiar, doesn't it? When Fraser reviewed the Bellevue Stratford's employees, he discovered that on average, they were 10 years younger and healthier than those who got sick.
By now, 27 were dead, and the death toll was mounting, and investigators still had no idea what was killing these people or how it was being spread. They were convinced the outbreak of Legionnaires' disease had something to do with the Bellevue Stratford Hotel, but they still just couldn't find the connection.
And we now have our cousin Vinny getting his 5 minutes of fame on the 5 o'clock news.
As I said, I slept in the same room with two fellows that are dead.
Since individuals on the street had also developed the disease, that told them that it was not waterborne or foodborne. It might be an airborne infection. But if the agent was inside the hotel, here comes the plug for why the show's OG name is this, Dr. Fraser's medical detectives couldn't find it.
At this point, the outbreak is slowing down, so they think the cause of the disease might now be gone. So the only hope to find answers is in that lab. But at the University of Connecticut, Dr. William Sunderman received an anonymous letter saying that the Legionnaires were intentionally poisoned.
While in Philadelphia, Sunderman turned the letter over to the FBI, but Sunderman was an expert on nickel carbonyl, clear, odorless liquid that can be transformed into a lethal gas. Who knew?
Apparently, nickel can spread through the air, and it certainly can cause pneumonia. That kind of pneumonia can cause a particular pattern that was not so different from what they were seeing in the Legionnaires case.
Tests on liver samples revealed that nickel was present in those who died. But this is a huge waste of time because what they thought was a major breakthrough was actually just lab contamination from their peeling scalpels used during the autopsies. When they used plastic ones, the nickel was gone, and the investigators were no closer to finding the cause of Legionnaires' disease.
So now we're at the Christmas holidays, and some of the CDC staff decided to take some time off, as they should. The numbers weren't going up, let the people spend some time with their family. But then we're watching this Christmas party reenactment.
We're back in black and white, and the guests are ganging up on Dr. Joseph McCade, a CDC microbiologist, and his wife, asking why he and his colleagues were unable to find the cause of the outbreak. Peter says, frustrated, angry, and embarrassed, McCade canceled his Christmas vacation and returned to his lab.
Alone in his lab, he's looking at the slide of a guinea pig, which had been injected with liver tissue from a Legionnaires victim. And this is also how I explain in one sentence why this would never be a career path for me.
He had seen it hundreds of times before, but this time in the lab all alone, he noticed something he didn't recognize, a new bacterium that Drew says ecstatically as if he knows what he's talking about.
He tested his newfound organism with a blood sample from a Legionnaires' disease survivor. That blood sample should contain antibodies which successfully fought the disease. If the antibodies were present, the sample is supposed to turn green.
McCade looked through the microscope and saw a bright green glow, 147 days after the outbreak. The bacterium which killed 34 and hospitalized 221 others was officially given its name, and we're going to have them say it to spare ourselves the embarrassment.
Legionella pneumophila.
They name it in honor of the Legionnaires in Philadelphia, and I don't know if I would want a deadly disease named in like the honor of the group that I was so proud to be on.
Yeah, that's fair. So what do you do in your free time?
Well, I'm a Legionnaire.
Like the disease?
Mm-hmm.
Any plans this summer?
I have a Legionnaire conference coming up.
Like a disease conference?
Maybe.
See if I make it back alive. Well, researchers were able to identify an antibiotic that would kill it, but this only makes my paranoia worse because it's erythromycin, and that is the only antibiotic my daughter is allergic to. So I really wish we didn't know about Legionnaires because there's nothing I can do. Okay.
Now the question of where this bacteria came from still remains to this day. However, they have a pretty solid theory.
Researchers quickly discovered that it multiplied in warm, watery conditions and could travel through the air in contaminated water droplets or mist. Since some of the victims never set foot inside the Bellevue Stratford Hotel, but were on the sidewalk in front of the hotel, Dr. Fraser believes that the bacteria most likely came from the roof of the hotel, from the air conditioning water cooling towers.
I don't know how many listeners are listening to us from New York City, but you always in the summer get dripped on from the AC units. It's just like known that you either like you have to look up and be like, is it starting to rain? Oh no, it's clear blue skies. It's just coming from the AC units. And like this is like a new fear unlocked because I always felt paranoid about it, but like until watching this episode now I'm like,
maybe you have antibodies. Maybe you were already exposed to it.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah,
I guess
hope.
it's important to know how this all works. And we get these really basic animations. And it kind of was giving like a lesson inside of like a high school when you had to watch like how like
Schoolhouse Rock.
Yes. Oh my gosh. But it definitely gives us the basic animations and goes inside a cooling tower and it tells us how it all works step by step. So inside the cooling towers, warm water is cooled as it cascades over wooden louvers. The excess water falls into a collection pan at the bottom, where it stagnates if it fails to drain properly.
Investigators believe it was here, inside these water cooling units, where the deadly Legionella bacteria grew and multiplied. It was drawn up into the air by the unit's powerful fans. Now airborne, the deadly mist of bacteria in warm water flew up into the atmosphere and floated down to the side of the building, making its way to the street below.
And it landed on pedestrians walking by the hotel and was also drawn into the hotel lobby by intake fans. Hotel employees probably developed an immunity to the bacteria or weren't susceptible because they were younger and healthier than those who contracted the disease. And we see a photo of them and they all look like extras from the show Sopranos, or like this photo was taken and then it was put on like a wall of like a pizza parlor in New York City. They are not looking at all like that young to me.
No, me neither. The cooling tower theory was never proven, though, because by the time researchers knew what they were looking for, they couldn't find it in any of the samples from the Bellevue Stratford Hotel. The bacteria had long since died, which is good.
Yeah.
But investigators did discover the same bacteria in similar cooling towers in other parts of the country.
This part is wild. Scientists believe Legionella has been killing for thousands of years. And when blood samples from earlier unexplained outbreaks were examined, they discovered the Legionella bacteria. The earliest documented outbreak was in Austin, Minnesota in 1957, and in Washington, D.C. in 1965, where Legionella killed 16 people.
Bob McGarry and Charlie Davis are back, and we are very fortunate that they survived. Our boy Bob never caught it.
Thank God.
He was younger, he didn't smoke, and he had no pre-existing conditions. Our hottie Charlie was in the hospital for 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm very glad for the sake of his baby mama with all those 5 children of his that he made it out alive, because let me tell you, if a man left me with 5 children, it would send me right to my grave, and then I would find him and chew his ass out in the afterlife.
These two remain BFFs until the end, I assume.
And they both wrap the episode up with some confusing quotes.
I was at the wrong place at the right time, as far as that was concerned.
Had it not been for the unfortunate incident that occurred with the rest of the delegates and brothers, I could say today it was a great time, but I was not going to press my luck. I seen it once, I don't want to do it again.
And then Bob smiles at the end of like saying that quote. Like he knew he just nailed that line. I imagine the whole crew like standing up clapping. I was like, that's a rep on Bob.
And he was like, yeah, this was a strange episode, and I actually can't imagine that there are any updates, but knowing you, I feel like you found some.
There really aren't any updates to this. It's just like a new fear unlocked, and I'm very sorry for anyone that also didn't know about this and like has to add this to their list of things that when they get sick and they're like, is it COVID? Is it pneumonia? Is it Legionnaires Disease? I don't know. But you know, if you don't want to, I do not suggest looking up any recent cases. You don't need to know, because you know what? You know what I found out? That there's nothing you can do about it. Like there's fucking nothing. There's like nothing. So luckily most of the time when you go to the doctor for pneumonia, they are treating atypical and typical pneumonia. So they're going to treat both. They're not even going to like really test if you have pneumonia. They're not going to figure out like what it is. They're going to give you an antibiotic now that should treat both. So that at least can put your mind at ease.
Yeah.
So if you do get sick, always go see a doctor. Make sure you don't have pneumonia, because that terrifies me. Pneumonia scares me so much. I actually had a coworker lose his fiance in her sleep to pneumonia. It has like terrified me since. Yeah. It's just so scary. It's so scary. Oh, but I did look up Bob and Charlie, and I'm very sad to say that Robert M. McGarry, I know, he passed away on Saturday, November 14th, 2009, at the age of 80. Sounds like he lived a very happy life surrounded by family. And I tried very hard to find out about Charlie, though. They did say he was older than Bob, so I am assuming he passed away as well.
Or he's living his best life.
Floating away in his house of balloons.
Now for our missing persons case we would like everyone to know about is actually a murder case that we would like to share information on in an effort to reach someone who knows something and can eventually come forward to get sweet little Emily Pike justice.
The Missing and Murdered Indigenous People organization shared a post on their Instagram, which is at MMI Who Is Missing. And below Emily Pike's photo is the caption, and it reads this: "Say her name, Emily Pike. We are absolutely devastated and outraged by the horrific murder of 14-year-old Emily Pike, a young girl from the San Carlos Apache tribe. Emily was reported missing on January 27th, 2025, and on February 14th, 2025, her dismembered remains were discovered off Highway 60 near Globe, Arizona. Yesterday, she was publicly identified. This is not just another tragic case. This is the ongoing, relentless, and preventable crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people. A 14-year-old girl should not vanish. A 14-year-old girl should not be found in pieces. A 14-year-old girl should still be here alive, safe, and with her family. The violence against Indigenous women and girls is systemic. It is persistent, and it is enabled by a society that continues to ignore our missing, our murdered, and our stolen sisters. We refuse to be silent. We refuse to let this be just another headline."
The post continues with, "Emily deserved better. Our Indigenous children deserve better. We demand answers. We demand justice." If you have any information that could help bring justice to Emily and her family, please contact the authorities. The County Sheriff's Office detective at 928-200-2352 or the Bureau of Indian Affairs Special Agent at 505-917-7830 or the San Carlos Apache Tribal Police Detective at 928-475-1755. Do not let this case go ignored. Say her name. Justice for Emily Pike. And we have shared this post on our Instagram at Forensic Files Podcast. But first, please go and follow at MMI Who Is Missing and at Black and Missing FDN. Thank you.
All right. Well, our next episode is season 14, episode 16, called Gone Ballistic, or as Drew likes to say it,
Bulletistic.
I'm actually looking forward to getting back into the true crime stuff.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and just also when I saw the title of that one, I was like, yes, I get to hear Drew say bulletistic again.
Bulletistic.
If you like our podcast, please help us spread the word, share on social media, share on Reddit, share everywhere, and drop a review to tell us what you think.
Until the next one. Bye.